Welcome to my Worst Memory, a Workplace Safe Space podcast. I'm your host, Robin Cohen, founder of Happy Your Office and operations expert. Each episode, I'll sit down with some of the best in the business to talk about some of their worst professional memories. Together, we'll dissect corporate culture, leadership techniques, and scaling snafus we've lived through so you don't have to. Today's guest is Jon Beck. Hey, Jon, how are you?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Jon is the Vice President of People at ButcherBox. ButcherBox is an e-commerce company that ships high-quality, sustainable sourced meat and seafood right to your door. As ButcherBox's VP of People, Jon manages all of the people-related verticals, including talent acquisition, performance management, HR, compliance, benefits, culture, as well as events and experience. He's been with ButcherBox for about 3 years and has had a fascinating career transition from education to tech startup and people leadership, and we'll dig into that in a bit. So ButcherBox is such a great brand, has incredible product, but one thing that's really wonderful about the company is that y'all have been so intentional about creating a corporate culture that's people first and innovative. I'm curious, how does that manifest day to day in your role as VP of People?
Yeah, in terms of like manifesting in the day to day, I think it really starts with the core values of our company. Core values are at the forefront of our work. We're really clear on how we expect all employees to exemplify these core values. We have like a matrix that breaks it down to a very like granular level, which really helps us set this foundation of everyone being very aligned in how we expect people to operate. We just offer first-in-class benefits, whether it's like 20 weeks of parental leave, extraordinary 401k, charitable giving, you name it, we've invested in it. We just want our people to have the best experience possible, and we want to make it so that they can use their time on their work and they don't have to think about these other things. One thing that sets us apart is our use of data, specifically Peakon Employee Voice. It's kind of like an add-on app that we have built into our Workday system, and it's people analytics. So every other week, every employee at our company takes a survey and questions rotate, but it gives us so much data about our people. What's working for them? What's not working for them? What are their blockers?
It's interesting how data-centric the team is. I think when people traditionally think about HR, marketing, some of like the softer sides of business, they think there's no way to measure it. But that's not true anymore. There's all this technology that can help you actually quantify how your team is doing.
100%. It's not vibes, right? It's data.
Vibes are good too. They're important. But when you think about, living those values, do you have an example of how that comes to be?
Yeah, I would say one that comes to mind is relentless improvement. Like we know that we have a good culture, but in order to maintain this really strong culture, what we've been doing isn't always what's going to work. So we look at the Peakon data regularly. We had a score, I don't know the exact question offhand, but something around this piece that is leadership and executive team communicate their strategy effectively. And we were seeing really low scores on that question. And we knew immediately, like, this is an area of growth for us because at ButcherBox, we like to do a lot. And we really, really needed to push ourselves to focus. And so we've taken that data that says we don't clearly communicate annual goals, and we totally stripped out our process and created a totally new one with our business operations team. And so with that, we've instilled what we call a rallying cry, the singular one thing we are all focused around. And I think it's really helped us, A, communicate what we're working on, and two, be super, super clear on like, of all of these priorities we have, this is the one thing that is going to trump all at all times.
That's great because it makes decision-making so much clearer, especially because how many folks are at ButcherBox now?
200.
Okay, so you have 200 people who are all operating with some level of autonomy and independence, and they need to make sure that the work they're doing is laddering back to the places it should be, right? Because there are so many distractions and so many ways that people can go about doing their jobs. But to be able to say, okay, this is the rallying cry. If it's not supporting this part of the business, it's out, is super empowering for your team.
Right. Everyone's aligned. We're rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
I also wanted to call out on that score, we saw improvement from the net promoter aspect of like over 30. When you look at it on a graph, it's like, it'll break your brain.
Yeah. So you saw this data. It wasn't where you wanted it to be. Totally broke down the process, tried something new, and then you had a 30% leap in value.
In
I mean,
about
that's incredible.
probably like a 6-month runway.
That's great. So how often are you measuring this?
At looking at net promoters, you can see swings pretty quickly. Since folks are taking surveys every other week, which honestly feels like a lot, but we've made it so clear that we are like invested in this data. We will enact and like make plans based on this data. I think it really helps from the buy-in aspect. If you're going to implement something as deep as like a new annual planning strategy, that's going to take like quarters.
Sure.
The company applies a sense of urgency to our work. And we felt like we were just not moving urgently enough on the right work. And so getting some data on that has been helpful. If you can't tell, I'm kind of a data nerd.
Yes, I love that.
Under the guise of people leader.
Under the guise. And does that tie back to maybe your math teacher background?
Math teacher background, we could go there for sure. Yes, I've always enjoyed the numbers.
For our listeners who don't know, before Jon was the VP of People at ButcherBox, he was a 6th grade math teacher, a principal for a charter school. So how did you end up leading people at ButcherBox?
I would say first and foremost, like I've been very lucky with this opportunity, and like it's not lost on me like how amazing this transition has been. So going back to your question, I was a high school principal during COVID, which turns out was really hard and frankly not so enjoyable. And so after we had our second kid, I took some leave, and it really helped me understand like what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And I really knew at the time, I was like, I'm not enjoying this. I'm spending all my evenings on the phone, crisis management. I really want to be able to sign off every once in a while. Not every minute, but every once in a while, and spend some time with my kids.
What a concept.
What a concept.
That's wild.
And so in short, I was burnt out from being in the school system for about 10 years, had kind of worked my way up to high school principal, and I just knew this isn't what I wanted to do long term. And I was really direct with that. I spoke with the executive director and I said, hey, I'm not enjoying this. I don't want to do this. So when I stepped out of the role as high school principal, I put together some independent consulting. I had a few clients working on some like different operational work. And one of my clients was actually ButcherBox. So the VP of People at the time was Eliza Jackson, who's my current manager as Chief People and Administrative Officer. And she said, hey, our company is growing so quick. I need some support on some ad hoc project basis. So I mostly focused on like learning and development, ran some trainings with managers, supported with some other ad hoc projects. Then ButcherBox reached out to me and said like, hey, we have like a full-time consultant role for you. No interview. We've seen your work. Do you want this job as a consultant? And, my question was like, well, what if I can't cut it? I haven't really worked outside of schools. And I was nervous because it wasn't a full-time FTE gig. They said like, if we prove ourselves, it could become one. But I took the risk, and it's just been amazing ever since. It's probably the best decision of my life.
I like what you said about having that kind of self-conscious moment, because I think a lot of us see VPs and C-suite and we think these people, they just have it all together. They had a super traditional path. They're so confident, but no, at every level. And I hope that what folks are taking away from this podcast too is that we're all still just people. Even if we're VPs, even if we're C-suite, even if we're consultants, we're just people and we're trying to figure it out. And some of us are faking it till we make it. But for the most part, we take what we've learned from our past jobs and just try to apply it and move forward and iterate.
Right? It took me a while to find that confidence. In fact, I worked on it for my entire first year. It was like my goals because I had the right answers and the right approach, but I didn't have the confidence as well as the relationships, right? Like getting to know people at a company, and maybe we'll get into that, is so important. But it takes some time to build that.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, yes, the department is called, people, but really you are working with humans all day, every day. And if you can build relationships and manage hormonal 7th graders and their emotions and relationships, it's probably like a piece of cake talking with adults.
Yeah, that is one of my reflections, right? As a principal, my biggest stakeholders were teachers, parents, and students. And it's really, really hard and really different in working with all three of those stakeholders, and really being able to focus on just like the internal team in some ways feels like a much smaller and easier scope.
Well, at least at ButcherBox, good for them for being willing to recognize the transferable skills that you had as a teacher and to take a chance on you, right? And I imagine you've been able to build such a strong department because of your foundation navigating through education as well as for corporate America.
While it's not directly part of our strategy, we've seen so many success cases of bringing folks on as contractors, like seeing them in action, how they operate, how they work with others, and really being able to get that like glimpse into how they actually work before they become full-time employees. There's something to be said there, right? Like, again, it's not part of our intentional strategy, but a lot of the times, like when people are strong, we flip them, bring them on board, and there's no better way to see someone, right? Like, you're only going to get so much out of interviews, but seeing someone actually do the work with cross-functional stakeholders, see the pace at which they move work forward, there's something to be said about that.
Well, it's a great way to de-risk your hires. You can de-risk by bringing them on and just watching them work, because a lot of people can kind of fake their way through an interview, but when you get in front of someone, it's clear you either have the skill set or you don't. And to give them that time to also get to know you as a company and decide, is this the right match? Before you invest in benefits and everything else, you can really try to figure out, is this the right person for you, and is there a mutual fit?
Yep, 100%.
So shifting gears a little bit, I have to ask, it is the name of the podcast. When you think about your career thus far, what is your worst memory?
Okay, here we go. So I'll call this one the Hunger Games interview. You ready for this?
Yes, I'm intrigued. Do
Okay.
you have a bow and arrow? Are you having your side braid on like Katniss? What's going on?
Just ill-equipped, as was, I think, everyone in that room. But that's okay.
Okay.
It's 2014. I'm applying for a director of operations role at a school. And, on paper, I'm a finalist. Really looking forward to this. And so the selection day is a final round interview in which they brought in 11 candidates, including myself, as finalists.
Wait, so you as someone interviewing think it's just you going to the final round, or what was your perspective at the time before you walk in the door?
I knew they were bringing the finalists on site. In my mind, I'm thinking like, I'm probably like, maybe I'm one of 3, one of 4. Like when I think finalists, I think of like, okay, you've risen to the top. You are clearly a fit for this role. And we're just going to have you like, see if you're the best of the few.
Yeah.
But the best of 10, I'm doing some quick calculations in my head. I'm like, okay, well, it's going to be hard to land this job. Okay, so I show up and we're all in the same conference room together, all of the finalists, to kick things off.
Like a waiting room?
Nope, like a conference room that's going to be like our hub for the day.
No. Okay.
And so instantly the vibes are like, okay, so if I want this job, I need to be better than you. And you're just looking around the room, right?
It's like a casting call for a show.
100%. And like, it was just, so I'm in there, I'm processing live. I'm like, okay, first of all, this might be hard to get this job, but like, I knew that going in. It's going to be a great experience. And so you're sitting elbow to elbow with 10 other people who are going through the same day. But let me give you the twist. You ready for this?
Okay. This wasn't the twist?
No. I mean, this is part of it. But the twist was, so there was a handful of activities that we engaged in. And so some of them were like a one-on-one meeting with the chief operating officer, a prioritization task, a role-played conversation, difficult conversation. They give you feedback, you run it back. But what stuck out to me most was there was a group exercise in which all of the finalists are working together on a task.
Why?
I can't answer that. But I can tell you, really, really, back to my title of this experience, really felt like a Hunger Games experience, right? So like as you're working with this group, it's clear that they're looking to see like who's going to come out as like the quote top dog, right?
Sure.
And so it's not collaborative, right? But that's not how one would actually want to work with others.
No. Wait, so you have 10 or 11 people in the room who all want the same job. So they're all trying to prove themselves, but now you're asking people to work together. Was this some like Jedi mind trick? Were they trying to see who could actually build relationships in a tense environment? What was their angle?
Yeah, I think it was to see how one works under pressure, but I think it's missing that piece around like building a collaborative space. And I can't explain to why they did it, but I went through it and I remember after I walked out that door, I was like, and just like, building that kind of experience. Sure, maybe it was helpful for them to see the interview panel, to see like how we all perform under pressure. But at the end of the day, like my candidate experience was dismal, right?
Terrible.
Like I left that day being like, oof, that was brutal.
Yeah.
One person straight up walked out mid-interview day, closed laptop, said it wasn't for them, and just left. And
You
so
know
like
what?
that says it all, right?
I would respect that person though, because why put yourself through something terrible if you know that it's not for you? Just like save everybody the time. Be an adult and just say no thank you. I'm gonna bow out gracefully.
But maybe this person would have bowed out earlier if they like knew what they were walking into. And so I should also call out, first time I went through this experience, I did not get the job. Turns out odds were pretty low.
First time.
Yes.
First time. There was a second time.
There was a second iteration that I had gone through. 1 year later, they shrunk the scope of it. So like if I'm remembering correctly, it was like maybe 3 of us. And like it was a little different. I think it didn't have that group activity. So it was adapted.
But the fact
which was
that
for the
you
best.
Yes, but the fact that you even went back for a second iteration is wild. Why would you do that after having such a poor experience?
I really, really wanted to be a director of operations at a school. I really did. I had been in schools for a bit, and I realized that this speaks to my skill sets because like it's such a like broad work. So the idea of this director of operations role is that I do all the administrative tasks that a principal would typically do, but it was very like jack of all trades job. On my feet, walking 12,000 steps a day. And I actually loved the job. And I did it for 3 years before moving to a charter high school and being an assistant principal and then principal.
Wow. Okay, so your
You
love
can't
and
get past
passion.
this that I would do it twice. You just
I
can't.
can't get past it. I can't get past it because to me, that is such a poor candidate experience. And the fact that there would be, I mean, I get it. If there's only so many of these jobs and you really want it, like, yeah, we all make accommodations for different roles that, and maybe excuses for why they would have done the things they did. I don't know. I mean, that person that walked out of the room, I think says it all, right?
Yeah.
That is such a terrible way to treat candidates. And I don't know. That's some like next level. You're right. Hunger Games stuff. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Makes 2 of us. But I do have to say that adapting the process afterwards like says a lot about like, you know, there was something there, right?
Yeah, there was something there. And clearly they were trying to get something out of the experience. But I wonder, you know, what was the impression you had of that school or that company? Because I think when folks interview with companies, it's just as much an interview and representation of the brand as it is for the person, right? You're putting yourself out there as a candidate, but that company is putting themselves out there as a business, whether it's a school or a meat distributor, right? How did that make you feel going through that experience?
I was a little beat up and exhausted, but at the time I was maybe 25, 26. And as I said, like I really wanted to be a director of operations of a school. I'm not, my wife might disagree. I'm a somewhat competitive person. And I think the competitive aspect, after I was able to get through this, like, whew, that was brutal. I don't know why I went through that. I think some part of me was like, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to do better. I have a lot of learnings from the last time I went through this experience, and I'm going to apply them, and I'm going to get this job. So
Okay, so
I'm sounding
turn
really
it into
competitive right now.
You are, but you know what? It's interesting because that became a motivating factor for you, right? Whereas the guy who left was probably like, this isn't my vibe, I'm out. But
100%.
was that the culture of the school where you were interviewing? Was it a competitive, intense place to work?
I would say intense, yes. Competitive, less. In the job, I felt like very supported, but it was very intense. The days were not short, but I was young and hungry, and I was really invested in the role.
Yeah.
And I learned so much. Like, I really don't think I could do this job that I do today without that experience.
Totally.
So for that, I'm thankful.
What you mentioned about being young is a really interesting point, right? I think when we're younger in our careers, we make different choices than we would make now. I went through so many interviews that were asking you to do free work, asking you to come on for some weird test period of time, but not as a contractor, just as like some free labor. And we make those choices because it does sound illegal, right? But that's just what we all did because that's what we thought the interviews were supposed to be like. And nobody told us otherwise. So we just rolled with it because we didn't have the experience. And so I think when you think about a company you want to work for now, to me, it's really critical that the role and the place and the culture really aligns with what I'm looking for. I'm a consultant now, but when I was in-house, as a 35-year-old, I'm not willing to take a job at a place that's not a good fit compared to maybe when I was 21 and I just needed the paycheck, right? Or didn't know what I didn't know.
Right? Like, you know, you and I, we have like pickups and drop-offs, kid events. Like those right now are the most important things to me in my calendar. Like I need to be able to work at a place that's flexible. And ButcherBox like does that to a T in a way that I couldn't have imagined before being here.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, working 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., not conducive for pickups or drop-offs, really.
Turns out, yes, no.
Turns out not great, even though it's a business that really serves kids and families. It's not great if you
I do have to say
own.
the one aspect about that job was I was like so perfectly busy that like I don't think I ever looked at a clock while working there. I had friends who were doing jobs and they would share like, oh, it's like boring. I was like, boring?
I wish I was
being bored at work looks like. Whether there's like a gas leak and you have to evacuate the building, like a bus is not picking up. There's always something. And yeah, I'm thankful for that experience. And again, like at my current age where I'm at with my family, that wouldn't work. But I think I learned a lot.
I don't want to sound like I'm ragging on schools at all. I have so much respect for educators and administrators and just school systems in general. It is a hard job and there are so many logistics. That being said, it does sound like hell compared to working in tech.
It's fair. And my step count used to be through the roof. Now, I had to learn how to adjust to like sit in a chair for like hours at a time because that's not something I ever experienced before.
True.
But that's okay. I try to stay active.
But you got there, yeah. I wonder, so as we think about interview experiences and processes, how can folks who are interviewing really make sure that a company is in alignment with their values? So you went through that bizarre interview and somehow it motivated you, but for most folks, that guy that walked out of the door, right? How does he make sure in the future, what are the red flags that a company maybe isn't for you?
Yeah, I think it's really about asking genuine questions that are important to you. I see sometimes that folks are timid about asking the questions that are related to like flexibility and expectations, right? Like it would be hard for me to, in a first round interview, say to the talent acquisition team, like, hey, like just heads up, like I need to be able to do like pickups and drop offs at certain times. And like, that's really hard to ask as a candidate, but it's really important, right? Like if that is the most important thing in your life, you have to just like be able to be willing to ask it, right? Because you take that risk and one of two things happens.
But what about the bias? When I hear that, I agree with you. And also my stomach kind of lurches because I think, oh man, compared to that person who doesn't have kids, I might not get the job.
Yeah, but then it's not the right place to work. Yeah. You don't want to work there.
That's true. That's because if they're not going to support your lifestyle, right, and you're not asking for unreasonable things, you're just asking for like basic human things like being able to care for your family.
Yeah. And I think that's the point, right? Like you really want to like learn as much about a company and really get to know the culture. I think the one thing that is hard in this day and age is around like it's mostly a remote interviewing experience. And I think you can really understand the culture by like meeting some people, going on site. And so like some companies are fully remote. Like that's just not a thing.
Yeah.
But really getting to know the culture and the people, I think that's why like when we do our interviews, like we really want to make sure it's not about like creating a long or like very intensive process, but we do want each interviewee to meet with some key stakeholders and get that kind of diverse perspective. And like what I would hope is like within every interview, we really are interviewing for about 20 minutes and then letting the candidate ask 10 minutes of questions. Just thinking about that ratio, right, is like really important.
Yes.
Because to your point, Robin, like you really want to make sure they are a right fit for us as one piece, but we need to be a right fit for them. And it's only going to happen through them being able to ask genuine questions.
Yeah. And if you are interviewing someone who doesn't have genuine questions, they're probably not the right fit for the company, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. People I think struggle with like coming up with the right questions because I think people are nervous about being genuine or authentic about what's important to them. They're really trying to like, be very polished and like, it's hard. Like people, it can be hard to land a job.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like if it's not the right fit for you, it's just not going to last in the long term. And we want employees to be with us forever.
Yeah. One of the best experiences I had when I was in-house at EasyCater was the recruiting team there was fantastic, but they were intentional enough that every person on a panel had different focus areas that we would ask about. We had different questions so that the candidate wasn't just walking into the room being asked the same things over and over again and you're not actually learning about them. So I'm curious at ButcherBox, how structured is the interview experience?
I would say we have frameworks, but I would say we also give, like we do in our work, we give interviewers the autonomy to like take it in an authentic direction. We are very, very, very focused on making sure the person is the right culture fit. And technical skills, people can learn technical skills. They probably have them. They have them on their resume, their work experience. but it's all about the culture fit. And so to make sure that folks are a strong culture fit, we interview kind of against our core values. In the interview kickoff, you can actually choose what core value you want to interview for. And so that way we really dig in on like, are they a culture fit for humble? Are they a culture fit for accountable? And like what experiences can they share about relentless improvement in their previous role? And so we go all in on that. And the hope is that between the talent acquisition team and the hiring manager, they're handling all like the technical aspects of the job. For example, like I just interviewed a financial analyst. I didn't ask a single question related to her skill sets on that job. Nothing
But you're also
about it.
not qualified to ask those questions, right?
Well, I told you I'm a data guy.
I know you're a data guy, but you're not a financial analyst.
Yeah, that's fair. I partner pretty closely with the finance team, especially when it comes to like compensation, headcount, G&L. So just like key stakeholder that they might partner with.
Okay, I take it back. Maybe you are a little more financially
Well,
inclined.
I have a budget to manage, and this role would work with each department leader on their budget.
I see, but you didn't focus
And I think
on
I'm
any
a highly
financial.
sought after interviewer.
I'm clearly. But you didn't ask any financial questions. You focused on one of your key values.
Yes. But I would also add, like, it's also really good for me to be in the process, right? I can see it firsthand how my team is facilitating. I can see candidate experience end to end. It really gives me a helpful picture to be able to provide feedback on our process systems. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Speaking of, do you ask for feedback from candidates on the interview experience?
it's a really good question. I'm not 100% on that. It's a good question.
Okay.
I'm actually going to follow up and find out.
Sorry to make more work for your team, but I found it can be really effective if it's done well, especially when you're interviewing with a company, even if you don't get the role. I find if the experience was really great, I will still give them feedback, right? If they ask, I'm happy to share because I know they took the time to craft a strong experience for me. But I think where it doesn't work so well is when you have a candidate who maybe had a less than ideal experience, like that one you went through. If someone asked that guy who walked out the door, hey, what was your experience like? You'd probably be like, no, thank you. You don't want to hear my perspective, right? But I wonder, as a candidate, say you're interviewing with a company that's bringing their best to the table. They've crafted a really intentional experience. You're getting to know the brand really well. How do you make sure that you show up in the best possible light? Especially now, there's so many folks who've been laid off, so many folks who are in the market, and you really need to differentiate yourself. So how do you do that?
It's really easy to tell when you're interviewing someone whether they are being their authentic self. And my recommendation for folks, and I think the interviews that go best when I'm interviewing someone, is like, be vulnerable. Really, really be yourself. Because it's easy to tell when you're not being yourself. And then then it creates this vibe of like, I don't know if they're exactly like that. Just really, really bring yourself to the interview. Because that's how you're going to know if it's the right long-term fit for both of you. But it's hard to do.
It's hard to do. And what if yourself one day isn't 100%? Interviews always happen when there's something else going on. You could be having the smoothest week, but you have that really important interview on a day when your car broke down or you're sick or you woke up on the wrong side of the bed. So how do you bring your best self to your interview without masking who you truly are? Is it just owning and saying, hey, I actually am having a pretty crappy day, but I'm excited to talk to you?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I have a story if there's time or not.
Please. Yeah, go for it.
But there was this job that I really, really wanted. This seems to be like the theme of our podcast, the jobs that Jon really wants.
Yes.
Okay, so there was this job that I really wanted. I had been in New York City interviewing for another role, came down with COVID. I had this interview coming up. It was a big one. Final round again. And I had been kind of like finalists on a few. The one in New York City I was a finalist for. And so like I really felt like this, of all the jobs I was applying to, this was it. Have COVID. And I wasn't wildly sick, but I absolutely wasn't myself. I was like, there's no way I'm going to postpone this interview. It's such a bad look. They'll judge me. There's no chance I'll get the job if I kick this. And I took the interview and I just wasn't myself. I couldn't think on the spot. I had really poor examples and I flopped. I didn't get the job. And I had so many regrets. Like, why didn't I just reach out and say like, I have COVID. I understand this is a deep inconvenience. I want to be my best. Can we find another time that works? And we'll never know how that would have worked or not. But it's such a prime example of just like, I wasn't my best. And they didn't see the real Jon Beck that day.
No, they saw sick Jon, who, probably had brain fog and maybe a fever and wasn't doing great. It brings up a good point, though, of you have to advocate for yourself. You have to be, you're the only one who knows the position you're in. And if you don't tell that recruiter or tell that hiring manager what's going on, how are they supposed to know? They probably just thought you were kind of a spacey dude.
Right. And to take it even further, in that interview, at no time did I say, I have COVID, I'm not my best. And that's another regret. And that's on me, right? It's hard to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I just didn't do it.
You bring up this point, right, about whether it's telling someone you're sick or that you need to pick up your kids or that it's really important to you to take your lunch hour, which is a basic human need. But, I think a lot of us have been conditioned that we have to be these perfect corporate robots. And that's not how the world is. That's not sustainable in any way. Maybe that works in your early 20s, but that doesn't work as you get older and life gets more complicated. You have to be able to bring your full self to your work if you want to be able to stay there and sustain and have a good relationship with the brand or with the company. So after you create this really intentional interview experience, say you want to move forward with a new hire, how do you set that person up for success? What does onboarding look like at ButcherBox?
Yeah, I would say similar to the experience of interviewing, we are very intentional about individuals not jumping directly into the work on day one. It's really, really focused on relationship building, getting to know the people, the processes, the systems. But like of all of those things, the people is most important, right? Without really close relationships, it can be very hard to move work forward effectively. And so when I was brought on full time, my manager at the time said, hey, I expect you to set up one-on-ones with all these people. Some of them were C-suite executives. Some folks were at the specialist level. She asked me to have a one-on-one with the CEO. And funny quick tidbit.
So stressful.
Well, I was so intimidated.
Yeah.
It was like a week or two in, and she's like, oh, have you met with Mike, the CEO yet? And I was like, no, like he's probably like pretty busy. She was like, you should meet with Mike. He would love to meet with you. And I was like, okay, so I'm just going to do this thing that I'm uncomfortable to do. And it was fascinating, right? Because I met with him. I'll never forget the meeting. And he sits down with me, and it was just like the most personal conversation of all time. There was absolutely no pressure. I like came in there with questions, things I wanted to talk about.
Oh my God.
It was just so much a conversation. Like he's an incredibly humble, down to earth leader. And the just like the vibe he created was like, hey, let's just like have a great conversation. So like by the end of that talk, we found out that we both like to surf. And he was like, hey, let's go to the North Shore, set up a time for us to like go surfing. And so I walked out of that room. This was like the opposite feeling of like Hunger Games interview.
Yeah.
The CEO is the most down-to-earth individual who's
He's
just
a
human like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, it became very, very clear to me that everyone from the CEO down is incredibly approachable, incredibly humble, and they're just people. And I think that experience that I had with the CEO, I would like to think like we replicate throughout the company. Like every person that you're meeting with, which is like very intentional and deliberate as part of onboarding, really gets you to like understand that like we're all people here and we have each other's backs, and like relationship building is vital.
Well, and that speaks to the strength of the hiring process, right? I've seen a lot of my clients, the CEOs, they want to be in every interview. And that's not sustainable when you're a team of 200, right? Classic. Yeah, they want their hands in everything because they care so much about the culture that they don't want it to get messed up, because once it gets muddled, it's really hard to walk it back, right? But to be able to have a team of 200 and have everyone be really mission aligned, really people forward is incredible. And that speaks to the strength of your team.
100%.
Let's take a break from, some of the heavier interview topics and let's go over to our water cooler. I want to know, weird interview questions. We've all had them. I know you had a weird experience. I remember I was interviewing for this job fresh out of college. So I just thought this was what interviews were like. I went in for a super day, which was sort of like what you described, except none of us were forced to work together. It was just like a lot of college kids who were all interviewing at the same time. And I remember I was so ready. I was coming in for a role and I knew what I needed to know for that role. And I walked into this room and the guy who ended up being my future manager was sitting there. He goes, hey, so I have a question for you. And I was like, oh, great. It's going to be like about marketing or operations. He's like, so you're in a train station. And I looked at him, I was like, what the hell is happening? And he starts describing this scenario where there's all these turnstiles and there's variable amount of people coming and going at different points, but one of the ticket machines breaks and you have to figure out how to predict the volume and the trains can only hold so many people. And I'm looking at this man, I'm like, what am I interviewing for? What is this role? And what I didn't realize at the time was he just wanted to see how I would think. And this was infamous. They called it the train case at Vistaprint. It was very much just like a question everybody got. But as the candidate, I'm sitting there and I was like, I don't know anything about trains, sir. I'm trying to reverse engineer these questions, but really all they wanted to do was see how you would think.
I was asked this question for, shocker yet again, a director of operations role. So you run a high performing burger company, think like McDonald's, and you have this burger that is top seller, best in the game burger, and that's what you're known for. And you as the business owner need to make a decision. Do you want to double down on this known burger, or do you want to come up with something new? And
This is like
obviously,
risk tolerance kind of a question.
I think it gets to the risk tolerance, but it's also, are you willing to go out of the box, or is the tried and true it? And for me, I'm much more of a innovative guy, as we talked about before. Like, relentless improvement is in my blood. I always want to do things better, and so that's the direction I took it. But all night I couldn't help but think, I was like, maybe it's just like, it was good, like, why don't you just
this is after the fact? You were like,
I couldn't stop thinking about it, honestly, for weeks, because clearly there's no right answer, but they just wanted, similar to your experience, wanted to know how I thought about it.
Well, I hope you talked to someone about it, whether it was your wife or a therapist, trying to get it out of your head.
All sorts of debriefs. Oh, yeah. I think I may have actually reached out to them after and talked to them. It was a weird experience. So they offered me the job, but then they didn't get the charter to open the school. So I actually stayed really close with them, and I really liked them. But I think we were going to a conference together, and I'm pretty sure I asked one of the interviewers, I was like, what were you looking for? She's like, just want to know how you were thinking about things. I'm like, huh?
You're like, that's what you wanted? You didn't have a right answer? We've covered a lot today, and I really appreciate the time. For folks who maybe work for an organization who are not as culture and people forward as ButcherBox, how can they go about starting to shift that culture and become more people-centric and people forward?
Yeah, I think I would start with core values, right? Like, understanding as a company, like, what is most important for you. And I think typically you'll see in a company as they start up, it may not be where they start, but it's something that they kind of grow into. But I think it's really important to set it out the gate and really be all in on what those things are. I think it really allows you to determine the decisions that you're making, how you operate as a company, like make decisions accordingly. So that's like the first thing that comes to mind for me. And I think the other thing I would just add is, like, sometimes it can feel like when you're investing in your people, like it's expensive. When you look at the budgets, you look at the P&L, how much we're spending on our 401k, like, that is a lot of money. But I think what you get when you really, really, truly invest in all of these things is the experience. Like, you have the right people who want to be there and who want to stay there. And so I don't think I could quantify it, but when you invest heavily in your benefits, you're going to have the right people, you're going to get them on board, and they're going to stick around, which is absolutely essential.
Yeah. How do you quantify the cost of a new hire or losing a hire?
Yeah, we've done several analyses because, as you know, I'm a financial analyst in my spare time here.
Of course you are, yes.
Yeah, there's some cost associated with it for sure. And I think some of it depends on the market, right? Like, right now, it's like a really favorable market for us hiring.
Yep.
We can usually close a rec in under 6 weeks for the most part. Our talent team is just amazing. They move quick. They get the right people on board. And I think it helps, right? Like, we're a very, like, mission-centric company. We're a sought-after place to work. Like, we have a lot of things that are very favorable to us that are not lost on me.
Yeah. But it's still expensive to train up someone, right? Like, how long does it take for someone to, what would you say, 3 months, 6 months before they're really performing in the role?
I would say 6. Yeah. And I know you asked a question about this earlier, like how we provide like the onboarding experience, but we have like a 90-day check-in that's kind of like a small forum for like interchangeable feedback between employee and manager. It definitely takes time, but also it is so important that you have the right people in the right seats. Like it just is. And so like sometimes it might be a hard decision, right? Like if you know someone is not the right person for a role, like it can be a really, really hard decision. It might not feel right. But when you get the right person in the role, you're unlocked. And so
everything clicks.
I didn't directly answer your question about like quantifying it, but it can be hard decisions to make, but also being strategic about it and making the right decisions goes a long way.
Yeah. And I think even without the number, if you think about the stop that has to happen when someone leaves a team, right? You spend all this time onboarding them, getting them acclimated. They build those relationships, which are invaluable, and then they leave. And assuming you didn't have a backfill immediately ready, productivity is going to plummet, right? All of your relationships are going to change. All of the points of contact, any of the like physical work they were doing, all of that kind of goes on pause. And then you have to shift into hiring. You're spending 6 weeks at minimum, probably recruiting, and then you have to onboard someone. So that could be like maybe anywhere from 3 to 9 months of downtime when someone leaves by the time to get just back to where they were. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It can be hard. And I would say like that is where for the most part we like utilize contractors as like a stopgap, and there's some opportunities there. But I think at the end of the day, like the right people in the right seats is everything.
Nice. Well, thank you, Jon. This has been so lovely. And to your point, now we're going to turn it over to you. What questions do you have for me?
I like this. I like this. I know that this podcast is just getting off the ground, but like what have been some of your biggest takeaways from anyone you've met with or worked with or interviewed?
Yeah, it's definitely been fun. It's been cool getting to know people kind of from a different lens, right? We focus all these conversations on ops, people, work, organizational efficiency. And what I'm finding is there's so much that has to do with the individual. The bad memories usually come down to just folks who were ill-equipped to handle a situation. So I think training is extremely critical too, making sure that your team and your staff are trained and know how to lead teams. It's not enough just to be good at your job. You have to really have that emotional intelligence, that coaching, that support to get a good experience going. It's hard. It's hard work to be intentional.
Yeah, we spend so much time talking about that, right? Because someone's like an absolutely fantastic individual contributor and exceptional does not mean that they are A, equipped to be a manager, or B, going to be a strong manager. And so we spend so much time talking about that and really investing in like, we have like a program for like our high potential team, which we run like a cohort every year, and just like really investing in those folks is just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jon, thank you so much for joining me for My Worst Memory, a Workplace Safe Space podcast. Your stories illustrate so beautifully the importance of crafting that good hiring experience, being really intentional with your culture and with your people. And I'm excited for folks to get a behind the scenes take on life at ButcherBox. So thank you again. And I like to close this out by saying another jargony phrase. As always, our door is always open, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Jon.